What is up, guys? Today we'll be talking about the Galaxy A51 versus the A70. Which one should you buy? Which one is going to be best for you? Let's start off with the price. So brand new, you can get an A51. The cheapest I saw was around $280. So the price does fluctuate sometimes, but I'll put those links down below. The A70 you can pick up brand new $300, or you can get it renewed like the one I have right now, and that one is around $220. Now this renewed is still going to be more expensive at around $250. So let's go ahead and get started with the hardware. So they both look very much alike. As you can see, they have the same sort of color shifting pattern on here, and you also have a slight difference with the Samsung branding being right here, and they moved it down below. You also have the sort of more trendy camera module setup versus the more standard traditional one that we're used to. And I think the A51 does look a little bit newer, I guess, compared to the A70. But they both are these, I guess, glass stick is what Samsung calls it, but it's really just plastic. It feels like plastic, but it looks good. It feels good in the hand. They're both very thin phones, and I think they both look really good. The A70 is a little bit taller than the A51. They have the same button layout, power button on the side, volume rockers down below, USB Type-C, headphone jack, single firing speaker on both. So let's talk about the displays. So you do have a 6.5-inch Super AMOLED display on the A51. You also have a 6.7-inch display on the A70. So they're both Super AMOLED displays. They're both 1080p displays. The A51 has a slightly higher PPI at 405 versus the 393 on the A70, but it's really not really noticeable. The most noticeable thing with both displays is really when it comes to the punch hole. So you have a water drop notch versus a punch hole. I really like the punch hole on the A51. I think it gives off a little bit more immersive experience, and I do think the A51's display for me is just a little bit easier to like hold in the hand. I think the size of the phone of the A51 just feels way better to me because it is a little bit smaller, and this is kind of a big phone. So if you don't like big phones, you might not like the A70 here, but they both look really good. The A70's display is a little bit more vibrant in colors. I do have them both on vivid mode, so you can go to natural if you want to dumb that down, but the A70's is a little bit more colorful to me as well. But it looks like you have really the same amount of bezel at the bottom, and then at the top it looks like you have slightly less bezel on the A51, but it's not really, you can't really tell. So for as far as displays, they both have very beautiful displays. I think I still like the look of the A70's display when it comes to just color, but they both look really spot on with deep blacks, very vibrant colors, and I do like the punch hole more for the A51. So for display, I personally like the A51 a little bit more. Alright, so let's go ahead and dive a little bit more into specs here. So on the A51, you have Android 10, One UI 2.5, the Exynos 9611, Mali G72 GPU, micro SD support, along with 64 gigs of internal storage and 4 gigs of RAM. On the A70, you have the same Android 10, One UI 2.5, but you have the Snapdragon 675 and Adreno 612, micro SD support, and larger memory at 128 gigs internal and more RAM. So does this translate to better performance on the A70? And yes, the A70 is definitely smoother than the A51. This base model. I'm sure if you get the 6 gig version 128, it'll feel a little bit smoother, but it definitely is a little bit smoother. I just noticed like navigating, scrolling, stuff like that, you get less animation hiccups on the A70 like we just saw there. It's just a little bit more smoother experience on the A70. But before we get into the speed test, let's go ahead and check out the Geekbench scores. So we can see here with the Geekbench scores, the A70 does outscore the A51 Exynos processor, as we can see here in both single and multi-core. So let's go ahead and get out of these applications, see a real world test, and see how they both perform here. Let's open up YouTube. A70, Subway Surfer, A70, Instagram, A70. So we can see the A70 is a much faster phone. Now, if you want better performance with the A51, you might have to pay a little bit extra more to get these 6 gigs of RAM. But it might not even really be that, because we're talking about CPU speed here, and you really see that when it comes to like playing video games and stuff like that. So that's why I said I think the A70 overall is just smoother phone here. But you can opt in and get that 6 gigs of RAM, and you will see a slight, speed increase with the A51. It's not slow by any means, but it's just not as fast as the A70. And let's check out our toggles. I believe we have the same toggles here. We have secure folder on both. Yeah, we have our dark mode on both, Dolby Atmos on both of these guys as well. I think, yeah, pretty much the same stuff on here, which is really nice. And you're not really missing out when it comes to features and stuff like that, but we'll get into that a little bit later. So this one's going to ask about gaming performance. Gaming performance is pretty much on par. The A51 can do high, and you can get better graphics on the A70 here. As we can see, we were on high with those graphics, but then we go to the A70, we can see that we do get, I believe, slightly better graphics, so we can do very high instead of high, and we can actually max the frame rates with high graphics. So you do have a more powerful gaming phone with the A70 here with that Snapdragon processor. So if you want the more powerful gaming phone, then it's definitely going to be the A70 for sure. Both these phones have a single firing speaker, so let's go ahead and check them out and see if one sounds louder or better than the other one, starting with the A70. Yeah, the A51 actually has a more bass presence and is slightly louder than the A70. I can actually hear the 808s. I can't hear the 808s, but I can hear the kicks on the A70. Yeah, I can't even hear it. Yeah, so you do have slightly better speakers on the A51. But they're both pretty loud, and they both sound really good. They're not distorting at high volume or anything like that. All right, let's talk about getting into the phone. So getting into the phone works the same on both of these guys. So you have your face unlock, which works really good, and you have a in-display fingerprint scanner on both, and they are pretty much the same speed. Yeah, they're pretty much the same speed, the fingerprint scanner. It's not the fastest fingerprint scanner, but it's never not worked for me. It just doesn't feel the fastest. It kind of like takes a second. So it's not the fastest one I've ever used, but they work fine. And like I said, you can use the face unlock, so you can just skip the in-display fingerprint scanner altogether if you don't want to use it, which is something that I really like. Both these phones have NFC as well for your mobile payments, so if you're somebody that depends on that, it's here on both of these phones. Both of these phones do not have any kind of splash proof rating or IP rating, so do note that. Alright, so let's go ahead and talk about the cameras with these phones, starting off with the A51. So you do have a quad camera setup on here. It's a 48 megapixel standard, 12 megapixel ultra wide, a 5 megapixel macro, and a 5 megapixel depth sensor. So we do have that additional lens, the macro lens, which allows you to get very close-up shots. You have a 32 megapixel selfie with 4K video on both front and back. So which camera do I like better? I think the A51 takes better photos as well. I do like the A51's cameras a little bit better. Color profile is debatable depending on what you like, but I do think detail and overall the focusing is better on the A51, especially with video. I find myself having to tap the focus with the A70 sometimes, but I do like the A51's depth of field and color, and also just detail. I think it's just a little bit better than the A70 for sure. Now, looking at the A70's pictures, you also have a very good camera. So you have a 32 megapixel standard, 8 megapixel ultra wide, 5 megapixel depth. You're missing the macro, which a lot of people don't use, so it's not a huge deal. You do have 4K video, but only on the back. You do not have 4K video on the front. So you do have 32 megapixel selfie camera on here, and it takes pretty good photos. Like I said, my only issue with this camera is that if you're not in the best lighting, then it kind of suffers with detail. But overall, if you're in good lighting, it's going to take some very good shots as well. And like I said, the image profile is really up to you, and they both have really good pro mode, so you can really get the same looking shots on both these phones if you want to do the pro mode and know how to use it. But they both take great shots, great depth of field, great color, detail. I really like the A70's cameras, but if I wanted to pick a winner, I think the A51 does take slightly better photos and a little better video as well. Last is battery life. So you do have a 4000 milliamp battery on the A51 with 15 watt fast charging, and on the A70 you have a 4500 milliamp battery with 25 watt fast charging. So the A70 charges faster and lasts longer than the A51. So if you want a phone with better battery life, the A70 is definitely the best option here. And again, I love that this phone charges much faster than the A51s because the 15 watt does feel a little bit slow these days compared to phones with the 25 watt and 30 watts, and some of them have 50 watts. So it does feel a little slow charging, but overall better battery life on the A70. So what do you guys think? Be sure to let me know, which phone do you guys prefer? Which phone do you want to see me compare the A70 to next? Let me know, and I'll catch you guys in the next one.